Hi, Vic. Would you envision having one guy pick up the brunt of the load with Chubb out, or do you envision a fairly even split of playing time between Ingram and Ogba?
Yeah, it's going to be by committee, for sure.
What's the strengths of each of that committee? Like, what does Agba do well that maybe Mel doesn't, vice versa?
Og's, a good pass rusher for the most part. Mel's a little bit more rounded in the OLB position, the ability to drop and stuff like that.
When you have a guy like Agba who's more of a traditional defensive end and is not extremely versed in that dropping back into coverage, do you have to call things differently or scheme things differently for him?
At times, yes.
Could you talk about last week? I know we're moving on to this Sunday, but you guys seem to play more man-to-man. There were some communication problems. Maybe I'm wrong there, but just watching.
Yeah, it wasn't that much more man-to-man than usual. Yeah, we had some execution problems. I think one of the biggest problems was I just didn't call a good enough game, really.
Has there been anything that's happened at corner in your mind that's made you rethink essentially what has been, obviously Jalen, but then Apple, Cater, in whatever order? Have any of the other corners done enough to make you rethink that, or do you go with the guys you've gone with in X's likely absence?
Yeah, I mean, when X went out early last week, we went with Eli, and Cater stayed at nickel. And I think that's the way we'll move going forward.
Vic, when you say you didn't call a good enough game, do you mean like calling stuff that maybe like you didn't expect? Like you saw things that you didn't expect from Baltimore? Like what do you mean when you say you didn't call a good game?
No, just that the calls didn't work out.
Do you look at it as like because the calls didn't work, you didn't do a good job, or like do you kind of look at it more like process oriented? Like, well, if your process is rooted in what you think is sound, you can live with the call. Like, how do you kind of rationalize your calls after the fact, I guess?
I'm not sure I follow you totally, but no, just the way it turned out. Some of the calls we put us in tough situations that we didn't handle well enough, and usually that doesn't happen. But you got to give Baltimore credit; they're a well-balanced, good offense, and they can do that to you.
How different is Buffalo now with
What's that,
How
Stevie?
different is Buffalo now than last time you saw them? New offensive coordinator, obviously.
They're different to some degree. We're really running the ball well right now, and when you are running the ball that well, play action game has opened up, so that's really helping them. They're really talented on offense. They got two really good tight ends. Everybody knows about Diggs. Their slot's a good player. Davis is a good player. Cook's the best back they've had in Buffalo, maybe since Thurman Thomas. And their line's doing a good job, and obviously everybody knows about Josh Allen and his ability. So they're highly ranked in most offensive categories, and when you watch the tape, you can see why.
Vic, when you guys used Jalen Ramsey to shadow Garrett Wilson, how did the rest of the secondary handle their different responsibilities, and would they be comfortable doing it again?
Yeah, they handled it well that day, and I think if we want to do it again, I think they'll handle it well again.
I wanted to get your thoughts on how Bradley got hurt late in the game. That was kind of out of reach. Do you regret having him out there at that point?
Well, obviously you do, knowing what happened now, but I think Mike addressed that earlier after the game or earlier in the week, and I'll just stand on what Mike said.
What does Cam Smith need to do either the rest of this year or headed into his second season to take a positive step in his career and be a more likely contributor?
Just improve in all areas, assignment, technique, execution, know-how, just a little bit in all areas.
Jerome Baker's returning to practice. If he can return to game action, what difference would that make?
It would help, We'd be able to have a better three-man rotation in there with him, David, and Duke, and it would help for sure. Bake's a good player. We've missed him. I think today's practice will be telling whether he can make it back or not.
Coach, all five Buffalo offensive linemen have played over 1,000 snaps this season. What does that continuity do for an offense, and how challenging is it make it for you guys to attack an offense that has that kind of O-line continuity?
Yeah, it's unusual for that to happen, as witnessed here locally with our offensive line. And they're good players too. So when you put continuity with good players, good things happen. And they pull a lot of their linemen. They do a good job scheming their run game. And I think that's attributed to continuity also.
What have you learned from the couple of games? I mean, you guys have been so good for most of the season. The couple of games where it's kind of gotten away from you. Has there been a common thread?
The two games I think you're alluding to are last week and our first Buffalo game. We didn't play well early, and things snowballed. And it wasn't one area that was letting us down. It was basically all phases, both run and pass. And I think when that happens, you get not back on your heels playing wise, but it makes you feel that way a little bit.
Is there similarity, different styles of quarterback, but Lamar and Josh Allen both run, they both pass, similar threats to?
Yeah, they are very similar. Different body types, different running styles, but the same problems for sure. Allen's just a beast of a guy, a physical specimen, like John Elway was in the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s. This guy is the new John Elway on steroids. And I don't mean he's taking steroids. He's just bigger, faster, cannon for an arm, tough. He's a dude.
Have you gotten any lobbying from Jalen Ramsey about shadowing, any good-natured lobbying from him? In general or this week? About shadowing, Diggs or whoever?
Occasionally.
What are the things that give you confidence in Eli Apple and playing you?
I think Eli recently has played better than he did earlier in the season. And, he's a veteran. There's know-how. He knows his limitations. He knows who he's covering. He knows the strength and weaknesses of whatever we're playing and does a good job adjusting.
Vic, I know you've mentioned before you're not a huge fan of the corners traveling.
I never said I wasn't a huge fan of it.
Maybe there's not a lot of situations you would do it in a normal game plan. Is that fair?
Yeah, I've done it a couple years in my career a lot, every week. But when you have two corners that you think are pretty good, then you're less likely to do it.
So I guess that was my question. Is it the talent of the corners or something schematically that maybe gives you an advantage of not showing your hand in that perspective?
No, I don't think it matters schematically that much.
I want to ask about shadowing quarterbacks like the Lamar and the Josh Allen. When you have a guy that specifically is assigned to shadow, and I don't know if it's every down or specific downs, what does it take away from the defense?
Well, a lot of teams will do that. And to me, the biggest question is that shadow guy the fourth rusher or the fifth rusher? And then that, affects what you're doing coverage-wise.
And Vic, does it matter if the shadow guy is closer to the line of scrimmage? I mean, is he pretty much out of the play if Josh passes the ball, that guy is pretty useless, right? If he's a little further back, he can at least play some defense. Is that a correct assessment of things?
It is. But if he takes off, you're farther away from him.